The Ward Scott Files is produced by Ward Scott Files, LLC.
Come on, everybody. Come on, everybody.
This is a Ward Scott Files advisory. The Ward Scott Files radio show may contain material not suited for people who are easily offended. Trust us on this. This show contains adult information and opinions. Please protect small children, sensitive pets, fragile houseplants, and liberal relatives. Thank you.
Good morning, good morning. Here we are on the Ward Scott Files, and we got Coach Hogg coming up here in a minute from the Ward Hogg Man Cave. Have we got that coming up there? Hey,
and
there
now
we go.
It's time for Coach Hogg's Locker Room.
Well, yeah, here we are. We look like we're in a little bit of a locker room today, don't we? Huh? Today's April Fool's Day, so we're operating under a little different lighting situation here because we got some pranksters at work here.
Because someone stole the lights.
Somebody, yeah, we got some prankster. And, if my head's shining just a bit, it's just the mind and the brain showing through, so don't bother too much. It's my halo. See how I'm directly under the halo? If you ever really wanted to take note, I'm always positioned directly under the halo back there. So, we got a good show here for you. And we got a couple of things, of course, in Coach Hogg's locker room want to start off with. And some of it is, of course, the Final Four, which has been out there. Surprisingly, have some newcomers to the Final Four. I got to tell you that the guy who coaches Auburn, he used to coach Tennessee, and he's done a good job at Auburn. And they're in there, and that's the first time they've been in there. I think the most well-known player that ever came out of Auburn in my day and time was, of course, Charles Barkley. And, of course, in Michigan, it was Magic Johnson. So these things are all they're starting to line up again, and it'll be an exciting time. And, of course, it's a big money maker in this, that, wing, and another. So that takes up some of our time. We also have noticed something odd going on with the University of Florida softball team. They're losing. I don't remember them losing this much. It has to do maybe with they don't have the cream of the creme pitching staff that they used to have. It takes a pitcher in softball to really carry the day. So maybe they're a little lean on that, but they've been losing, but they've still been putting people in the stands. And, of course, the Florida Relays was this weekend, had great weather for that, and it was yours truly ran in the Florida Relays in 1972, if you can believe it. Just amazing. And now I can't even get on the track. They keep the track locked up. It used to be the public could go out there and take a trot on the track, and it was all a community thing, but now the university, it's all about the university. It's not about the university and the community. In spite of how low can you go, bow tie post, whatever he says, you can't get on that track. It's locked up. So I quit running over there. It was, climb the fence?
Yeah, if you bring your lock picks.
Yeah, you bring your lock picks, okay. Well, in the NFL, we got a little couple stuff I thought might be interesting to you. In the AAF, there was a Sour Grapes article that came my way last week from one Mike Bianchi down at Orlando Sentinel. Mike used to be one of my students years ago at Gainesville High. But he wrote a kind of a Sour Grapes thing on the AAF and thought that the AAF League was not going to make it because of not enough money, and wrote an article about it in the Orlando Sentinel, which got sent up to me. And immediately I had some calls come in from people who know better and said that was not the right reportage, that the league is in good shape, and that, somehow, some way, Bianchi got some information and ran with it and made a kind of a poor showing in terms of his endorsement of the AF, particularly Orlando Apollos. But be that as it may, the Orlando Apollos had an exciting game Saturday, and you just cannot say anything else but when Steve is on the field coaching, it's not going to be exciting. I tell you how it went. There were about 3 minutes left in the game, and it was the other team had busted out ahead there, Memphis. And it had also had that strange moment when they brought the kid in there who come in from the Canadian League, who'd been such a problem, and they had him worked into the lineup. And then what's he do? He turns around and gets kicked in the head, which was a dumb thing to do. I watched him. He went out there and tried to make a tackle. You don't do that, man. And so he probably is out for the season. That was a pretty serious kick in the head he got. And help me out with his name, Jay. I can't remember now. That slept since then. But anyway, no, not Gronkowski. A kid for AAF who used to play for Texas A&M, whatever, went all over the NFL and got kicked out for drinking. You'll come up with it. Manziel. Yeah, Manziel was in there for Memphis Saturday and was moving the team pretty well, but erratically. He can't, he's like a a sprayed roach. You can't really depend on what he's going to do. He's not undisciplined, and then he threw an interception, went out to take care of the interceptor runner, and got kicked in the head, and that's it. But anyway, Steve won. I was talking to the wife, and I went outside. I said, well, I said, I think it's over. So I went outside and did a couple things just for a minute. Came back in. She says, guess what? Steve won. Well, that doesn't surprise me at all with 3 minutes left, him being down and him finding a way to win. And then what the announcer said was, obviously very much all about Steve and what he's like, and that is winners find a way to win. So if you never have treated yourself to a press conference by Steve, go take a look at them. They're all funny as heck, and they're out there. You can just Google Orlando Apollo press conferences, and you'll pick up one here or there. And it's hilarious stuff. I mean, it's just right straight from the heart, and of course he's the best academic mind. Really, I'd say academic mind of football we got, never had. Now over in the NFL, we got an interesting character who's been around. If you remember that our boy here, Aaron Hernandez from University of Florida, he actually was given about a $45 million contract when he came out of the University of Florida to play for the Patriots as tight end, and he'd actually beaten Rob Gronkowski out. I mean, he was playing and sharing time and eventually putting Gronkowski behind on the depth chart, and Hernandez was out there. Of course, he turned out to be what he was. But now Gronkowski, he's going to retire from the NFL, and the thing that's caught the eye of the business magazines is that he's got his entire $54 million NFL career earnings, and most of these guys are in the NFL, quite a number of them. Clinton Portis is a good example. Squandered $45 million, doesn't have a red cent to show. A lot of these guys, they don't have anything after 4 or 5 years, and they get big contracts. You wonder where it went. But Gronkowski, he's retiring from the NFL with his entire NFL career earnings, $54 million. He followed a very simple formula, keep it simple by saving surplus money, and he had only lived off his endorsement earnings, so he's in good company. As it turns out, with guys who make money and do well, they all have a frugal lifestyle. Some of the world's wealthiest people, like Warren Buffett, Mark Zuckerberg, are known for really frugal spending habits. And I've often wondered, what would I do if I won the big lottery and all that? Why, I have a friend who did win it, and, to his credit, he never changed his lifestyle much at all. A couple of little things, but not much. And, he could have gone off the deep end, as a lot of people do, and to get a big hunk of cheese like that. But Gronkowski is going to retire from NFL. That alone is news itself. But he's got his money. And Business Insider Scott Davis reported that Gronkowski's only age 29, and he's going to get out of there with a little bit more to show for it than some of the other guys have in the league. Now, there's some guys that are way up at the top, of course, and sign the big contracts and do quite well. We're not talking about them. We're talking about a lot of the guys. And as Gronkowski says, what got him to do this was he recognized in the NFL and in pro football, most of the career longevity is only about 3 or 4 years, 5 at the most. And after that, you're gone. It just is the way it is. Somebody younger coming along gets in there, can take the beating, and all, so you get replaced. So that was an interesting story that had to do with Gronkowski. The other thing that's interesting in Coach Hogg's locker room is the NFL Players Coalition has taken up bail reform. It probably would stand to reason that they would, given the demographics of the league and, some of the characters they've had who've been in and out of the jug and everything. So they've obviously either been in and out of the jug themselves, quite a number of them, or they have a friend who has. So the Players Coalition has taken up this whole deal of taking a look at social justice and racial equality. You'd know this would come down at the federal, state, and local levels through advocacy, awareness, education, allocation of resources, and that's their gig right now. And I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. And if they want to get involved with that, why, I suppose it's okay as long as they don't politicize it and put the race card in there. But it's already in there. They're claiming that racial disparities exist in the criminal justice system. So there we go. They're going to go off down that road, and of course that's automatically going to make them anti-Trumpers. And you just have to see how that plays out. But some of them are from Philadelphia and places like that where there's a lot of problems. And, New Orleans is not all that nice a place to be if you're on the wrong side of the tracks. And so they've decided there's a lot of things that the criminal justice reform space needs and that the poor people can't pay. All they're addressing is the thing we've been talking about in the criminal justice system, and that is there are differences for elected and connected. And there always has been, I suppose, and there always will be a difference in the elected and the connected. I just have to hearken back to that's one of the basic kind of principles of the judicial system. It seems that that this goes with the territory. That it's back to the old thing I've said sometimes: who's Boret the cabbage? But the big one right now that I want to cover, and I want to transition out of Coach Hogg's locker room, is into Corrine Brown. Now, I'm going to preface my remarks with our song, and I want Jay to play the thing all the way through, and because we got a great creative artist who makes these for us. We haven't played it for a while. To refresh you, Corrine Brown is in the jug. She's in there for quite a while. She basically stole money from the little chillin by telling everybody contribute to my little cause here, and I'm going to give it to the chillin, and she actually gave it to herself. And she was caught, and pretty overwhelmingly caught, and couldn't get away. But now she's got a new wrinkle. But let's hear Corrine Brown. Can you do it, Jay? Yeah, we go.
There was a rep named
Corrine Brown.
She had the biggest mouth
Around.
around. She thought she was the smartest rep in heels. Well, she started up a nonprofit and somehow made money off it and got involved in quite some dirty deals. She's in the jailhouse now. She's in the jailhouse now. That's not the way a charity runs. She won't be having fun. She's in the jailhouse now. Aye-oh, lady, hoo. Aye-oh, lady, hoo. Yo, the lady, hoo. Yo, the lady, hoo. Yo, the lady.
Here we go. Oh, yeah, buddy, that's a good creation there by one of our creative geniuses, a member of the Ward Scott Files research team. Been a great fan, long time here for the show, all the way back to the radio days, and hanging with us here. Corrine Brown. Well, I want to tell you a story, and if you can connect these dots, you're better than we are. We can't connect the dots. First of all, I'm going to start off with the fact that you may or may not know that the Supreme Court cleared the way to execute a Muslim inmate, provided that there's some things that were done, and that is that he have a person of his particular faith, if he wanted it, in there with him, or whatever he can confer with. O.J. Simpson in the jug in Los Angeles had Roosevelt Greer as his minister, and Roosevelt Greer had been an offensive lineman for the New York Giants and turned preacher man, and was in there with O.J., and O.J. confessed to the Roosevelt Greer, and the jailer outside heard it and went down the hall to tell the prosecutor, and then of course Johnny Cochran said, "You can't use that, that's a man talking to his minister." So, and that minister is God there in the room with him. So there was an issue here that it had to be settled by the Supreme Court. And, you can have a Christian chaplain evidently in the execution chamber with you or by your side or whatever. But the justices, and it was led by Kavanaugh, blocked the state of Texas from executing a Buddhist prisoner, Patrick Murphy, while Murphy filed a petition for review of his case on the merits unless the state allows either Murphy's spiritual advisor or another Buddhist priest to join Murphy in the execution chamber during the execution. Now, I got no problem with that. I think that's probably the right thing to say. If you're going to be able to have a Christian minister in there with you, and you're going to be able to have a Muslim whatever in there with you, and you're a Buddhist, you might as well have a Buddhist whatever in there with you. And, that Kavanaugh so ruled and said, what's been going on is that Texas allows Muslim and Christian inmates to have a Muslim or Christian spiritual advisor employed by the state in the execution chamber, while other inmates of other faiths, including Buddhism, can only have their spiritual advisors in the viewing room. So Kavanaugh acknowledged that states may have strong interest in tightly controlling access to an execution room in order to ensure that the execution occurs without any complications, distractions, or disruptions. But the answer to these concerns, he continued, would be to restrict all spiritual advisors regardless of the face of the viewing room. And you can't, in other words, what Kavanaugh said, you can't pick and choose who goes in the viewing room and who goes in the execution. Hey, treat them all the same. I think that's a reasonable. I think that was a reasonable conclusion. But here's what comes into. You can't believe it. I mean, it's amazing. And I want to thank our investigator, Mark Glazer, for digging this up with us. But Corrine Brown has now appealed her sentence on the basis of Kavanaugh's opinion on religious freedom. And here's what happened in the Corrine Brown, and they've tried this before. They have tried this and tried this and tried this, and it was just rejected outright. In the Corrine Brown trial, evidently there was a juror who was there, and he just stood up all of a sudden and proclaimed rather uncontrollably and blurted it out, "The law just told me that Corrine's innocent." Well, you can imagine how that went over. You know, when you take a look at some of the statements that are issued by people, I remember a book called Hawks Done Gone by Mildred Hahn. It had a character in it that really addresses this issue very well. The character, Mary Dorthula White was the character's name up in the Appalachian Mountains, and she had a way of saying this very thing and parsing it very carefully. She would say, I knowed in reason. That was one way you could know. I know in faith. It's another way you can know. I know in belief. So all those things are different ways of knowing. But in the courtroom, it's a knowing by reason. Okay? It's a knowing by reason. It's not a reading of the tea leaves. It's not a pressing the envelope to your head like Johnny Carson, the great Carsonini, used to do, and figuring out, yes, guilty or not guilty. It is known in reason. Now, you would think that Corrine Brown's liars, would know that also. But let me stress something to you. That doesn't matter when you are working to get your client off. So I'm going to read this to you. Do we have a copy of it, Jay? I can't remember. We're going to throw it up there for you. This is to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in Atlanta, Georgia. And we'll take a look at it. This letter is to advise the court, pursuant to Rule 28J, Federal Rules of Appellate Procedure, of the order entered March 28, 2019, granting a stay of execution in Murphy versus Collier. And that's the case that I just alluded to, that Kavanaugh said, you know, if the guy's Buddhist and he needs a Buddhist person in there and you let a Christian person in there, you got to do the same for the Buddhist. They have taken that decision and tried to stretch it over and apply it to Corrine. Now, you guys got sense. I want to know if you think this works, all right? Here it is, granting a stay of execution in Murphy versus Collier, Supreme Court case, and the court's attention is particularly directed to Justice Kavanaugh's concurring opinion, in which he states in part as follows: as this court has repeatedly held, governmental discrimination against religion, in particular discrimination against religious persons, religious organizations, and religious speech, violates the Constitution. There's the rub. You see, when they chunked that juror off the jury, which they did do, you can't say, oh my golly, right in the middle of the trial, before all the evidence is in and the reasons presented and the arguments and this and that, oh my golly, Jesus just told me to let her go. And I'm not lying. That's the way it went down. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that was basically it. Huh? Yeah, Jesus said, let her go. So now the liars have taken Kavanaugh's opinion in this Supreme Court decision about the Buddhist in the execution viewing room or in all that business, and applied it to Corrine Brown, who's still in the jug, all right, who, by the way, still has a regional transit system building out here named after her shamelessly. And I guess this incompetent group of commissioners here, who've got quite a few on it themselves with, you know, where they've been running from the law, then maybe they're waiting on a shoe like this to drop. Maybe they think, yes, somehow, some way, it can't be so that Corrine Brown, who, came from a gerrymandered district that stretched all the way like a horseshoe or whatever you want to call it. I guess it looked like a snake all the way down to Orlando from Jacksonville, just to make sure that they had a minority, representative. And she took full advantage of that, of course, and was graft and corruption all over the place. And she finally got tagged. And I got to tell you, the Ward Scott Files had a hand in that. We had some information we got and we spread and we saw it. Came out of Jacksonville. And Jacksonville is filled with this kind of stuff. So you tell me if you think that this is even any small way connected. I mean, how is it connected that, okay, if you're a Buddhist and you're in the death house and you want a Buddhist guy in there holding your hand or whatever, you can't have one, whereas a Christian guy can. That seems very fair. I think Kavanaugh was right. But the whole court of law thing's completely different. You're not going to let people decide, or you're going to go to Sharia law, I guess. I mean, that's the way Sharia law is done. I mean, it's quite often it's just done on emotion. So in reason, in faith, in belief, but in the courtroom, in reason. And this guy knew in faith or in belief or in Jesus spoke to him and nobody else on the particular jury. So that hasn't stopped. I mean, it's just amazing. I wonder where they cooked this up in their fevered brain that they could try this. But anyway, we'll keep you up to date on how that goes down. It's amazing. And I suppose we'll never get the Regional Transit System building renamed, off the criminal.
Under the rules of preemptory challenge, where you can get rid of jurors without a reason, like they should be fine. I don't get what they're trying to pull here.
What are you talking about? Here's the deal. They didn't do the lawyers didn't do a good job of finding that guy to be loony before he got on the jury pool, Jay. That's what you hire these the very good the guys will you pay a lot of money to get a criminal attorney to get what's called a jury psychologist. Okay, that jury psychologist sits there and studies everything down to how you sit down, which side you comb your hair on, and interprets all that stuff and says, well, given the way this person is, I would advise you challenge that person, get them off the jury. That is done in high-dollar criminal cases by guys who can afford it. I can tell you a couple of cases right now that went down that way, and I can tell you who the lawyers were, and you can say it's fair, it's unfair. If you got the money, you can get your lawyer to hire one of those people, and that person's pretty good, while you can probably tilt the odds a little bit in your favor. So, yeah, if this is a pretty long swing now to think that there's some guy that you're looking at, and who would know? How would you know? Well, you should know that you've got some basket case on there who all of a sudden. And how do you know the guy wasn't influenced by somebody who said you do that and we can maybe get the jury thrown out? I mean, she's crooked enough to have somebody do that. So you've got a situation where the guy right in the middle of the whole reason unknown in reason throws in a faith knowing, and there you go. I mean, you've got to hope. What they were trying to do is get a mistrial. What they did is they just removed the guy from the jury and put in a jury. They always select more people for the jury than actually go in there. So they picked the backup juror, put the backup juror in there, and they went right on about their business. And, the same facts were the same facts, and they were all weighed in reason and rationale, and arguments were made, and she was, just as guilty as could be. So now who keeps this going and who pays for this? That'd be interesting to see. Who's paying the tab on this? Is it Jesse Jackson? I mean, who's behind all? Is it Soros? Who's paying the attorneys for this stuff? Because you don't get these guys to go do this stuff for nothing, I would think. So, there you are. Just one. You won't see that anywhere, my friends, in the Gainesville Sun. All right? Let me go back to the Mexican Sun and the horrible limitations you operate under here in this community when it comes to getting the news. You will not, and even you in the state, I don't know if this is going to even come out in the state. I think we've fed it over to some state news agencies to let them know about it. But it's preposterous, but it's not uncommon for every wrinkle in the world to be tried. After all, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit, was the most famous line of poetry that I know of that ever occurred in a courtroom. And it was very, very convincing. O.J. struggled, bit his tongue and grimaced to try to get his hand in the glove, and Johnny Cochran back there he was like the guy who used to be Bondini, who used to be behind Muhammad Ali. When Muhammad Ali was out there in the ring, almost can remember his name. I see him back there in the back hollering, "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee." And he was chanting that the whole time Ali was out there in the ring. And this is kind of the way Johnny Cochran did the trial. "Hey, the glove don't fit, you must have quit." Had nothing to do with reason. The reason they actually throwed out the DNA. And as I can tell you, I had a black racist friend of mine here, and he really is. He's a black racist, but he's a friend of mine. And when I asked him about that, I said, "Hey, man, what do you mean? How can you guys just throw out the DNA?" And he said, "Well, DNA is white man's voodoo." So, and he made that statement. Do you understand what I'm saying? He made that statement not in reason, right? What did he make it in? I don't know what he made it in, but it wasn't made in reason. I want to follow up here a minute on a person who really got a raw end of a deal. I'm going to take a little time to go into this in depth because it is featured in the Wall Street Journal opinion page, and I want to hearken you back to a lady who was abused, in my humble opinion, quite severely by Talib, the Muslim, who was rude. And if I want to set the stage for you again, when Mark Meadows, whom I've met, who's a great guy, who's from North Carolina, out in western North Carolina, who's head of the Freedom Caucus, was, giving the people in the House Oversight Committee a little piece of his mind about the way they were behaving, about what they were, trying to pull off. And he was challenging Cohen's claims that Trump is a racist. I don't know if you recall that or not, but let's harken back to it. Cohen made the claim that Trump was a racist. Well, there was a lady back, out in the audience. Her name was Lynn Patton, and she's black. And she rose and she eyed the witness with a disappointed glare. All right, which prompted, as the Julian K. Melchior says, a diatribe from Rashida Tlaib, whom Obama is quoted as saying, "I'm proud of you." You don't, come on. Obama said to this Tlaib, "I'm proud of you," okay? And that's out in public. That's well documented. It's not just me saying it, which I wouldn't do anyway. Now, that prompted this Tlaib, who is a Muslim, who claims it's a Palestine, where there's never been, just because someone has a person of color, a black person working for them, does not mean they aren't racist, she said. The fact that someone would actually use a prop, a black woman in this chamber, in this committee, is alone racist in itself. Okay. So let's take a look at who M.S. Patton is. And it's pretty interesting. I did not know this about her, but it stimulated our writer, Julian K. Melchior, to pursue this in depth, and I thought I'd share this with you students. The lady who wrote this interviewed Miss Patton, and she said that the biggest racism to her, and she's a black lady, is the ideology, and I've been saying this forever on the Ward Scott Files, is the ideology that, again, black people can't be independent thinkers, that they can't vote for a party other than the Democratic Party. And Patton accuses the Democrats of fabricating racism where it doesn't exist. And that's been my exact beef with the Democrats. And the blacks have been letting them do it, all right? They have been letting themselves get played by the progressive white Democrats who use the blacks, use them for a power base and take them for granted, okay? That's here locally, that's out in nationally, and this Patton lady knows that. Now, she's 46 years old, but here's the thing about her that you don't know, but you will in a moment. She is a former cocaine addict. She worked for the Trump organization and got clean with the help of, guess who? Donald Trump and his children. Now, Donald Trump has never had a drink and has never smoked. That to me is amazing, okay? Just amazing. People don't know that about him. He had a brother who died an alcoholic. It made a permanent impression on him that he was never going to go down that path. He doesn't drink and he doesn't smoke. And so here was this woman who worked for the Trump organization and got help getting over this, and she went into how this happened. She joined in 2016 the campaign as a senior advisor for minority outreach. And in 2017, Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson, okay, Dr. Ben Carson, named her regional administrator for New York and New Jersey. And in that position, she began a social media campaign to highlight appalling conditions in some of these projects in New York. Nevertheless, when she was in the Trump organization, part of her recovery was relapse. She picked up the cocaine habit, if you will, in college. And, the thing about cocaine, and I've seen it happen to people, is we used to call it marching powder. Because what it would do to the people was it speed up their rate of activity. It hyperactive them. And the original, and I asked my wife about this, who spent a lot of time in Bolivia, learned Spanish in Bolivia. And I said, didn't those people chew the cocoa leaf up high? And she says, yes, they chewed the cocoa leaf. That's where the cocoa comes from, cocaine. They chewed the cocoa leaf because it enabled them to work high in the mountains and in the cold. And that's the origination of the cocaine. So it has the same stimulating effect on a lot of people, especially kind of people who grow up in high, challenging kinds of goals that they want, high-powered situations. And she went to Yale. She grew up in New Haven. She earns a bachelor's degree down at the University of Miami. And that wasn't any place to stay away from that stuff. But so she has been, approached by the Trump organization, and she, was getting herself together. And she says, but something I never even told the Trump organization was that I had times when I fell off, I fell off the wagon, so to speak. Then she said that Trump's presidency, his decision to run for president, because see, she'd been working with the Trump organization before Trump decided to run for president. She said his decision to run for president, she says, saved her life. Because the Trump family thought that she had stopped doing drugs a lot earlier than she did. She said, though, in this article, the Weekend interview, she said when she saw Trump come down the escalator, she was in a rare position to be there on day one to see him come down that escalator. She said it hit her that it was no longer about her. That whatever was going to happen from hereafter, she couldn't allow herself to embarrass the president. And from that day on, she did no drugs. And she hasn't done drugs. And she said, I can't do that because I respect this president. Now, this is a black lady who was smacked down publicly by this Tlaib. I don't want to say, and this is a family show, the words I would really use for her in the locker room. I'm just going to tell you right now how I feel about her. I mean, I really don't have any respect for her at all. And yet, Obama goes over there and says, I'm proud of you. Well, you can put those birds of a feather together as far as I'm concerned. So she's been in the thick of things. She's been in the rallies. She's been in the urban and rural communities. She's been out there working in HUD and the poverty and the drug addiction section. She's best known for her online campaign to publicize mismanagement at the New York City Housing Authority. And de Blasio criticized her when she went online with this stuff as being a reality TV show, that jerk. So Trump, that's how Trump first noticed her. He saw her working online to try to get something changed in the New York City Housing Authority. She says he saw me on television, and she saw what I was talking about, the humanitarian crisis in New York City Housing Authority and the conditions and the pictures that I was showing, and he called me personally on the telephone and said, I want to have a conference call with you about this. So she met Trump in February at the White House to discuss the New York City Housing Authority problems. Now, the Democrats, of course, blame that on stingy federal funding, but that's not the issue at all that's causing it. She says the central problem, now get this would make sense in New York. She says the central problem with the New York City Housing Authority is the unions. They have been getting rich off the backs of the poor people. 13, and unions have always been historically Democrat. 13 unions represent the New York City Housing Authority staff alone. Includes private contractors, divisions of labor. It means you often wait indeterminately for repairs. And she also says, and she firmly believes this, and this I want to conclude with this. And I've said this repeatedly. Black culture, she says, is by nature largely conservative. This has been one of the great mysteries to me. How can a culture which has beautiful people in it, magnificent families, a wonderful religion, who have a lot of pride, be hoodwinked by these low-down Democrats who don't believe in anything the black culture people believe in? Family, God, all that. They don't believe in it. And how in the world do they get used like that? So black culture, Patton says, is largely conservative. She says you're raised to go to church and you're raised to believe in the family. There you are. I wanted to get that out to you. I wanted to get that off my chest. I wanted to get that off my chest. I mean, that really irks me that we allow Tlaib and the other one, Omar, to get in there and run their mouths, and then this Obama to say that he's proud of them. Well, it bothers me, and it bothered Mark Meadows, obviously, and it bothered the Patton lady. It did not bother Tlaib. Under pressure, I think she made an obligatory kind of half-baked apology about it, but it didn't count for much. You know, it just didn't count for much. Now, I want to come back here for a moment and pick up, things are strange. But, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Things are strange. But back to this idea of Smollett and the mayor's race. It's The Hill has got an article here that has fleshed this out a little bit more for me. And the Chicago's voters are going to face a historic choice for mayor, and the city, of course, is divided by tensions. It has escalating political corruption, this is in the Hill, gang violence, racial tensions, and they are going to have a choice between two black women. And they're going to be able to use, this is entered into the theory about how the Smollett thing is played. They're going to have a historic choice, Tuesday's runoff, that's tomorrow, I guess, between Tony Prinkwinkle, the president of the Cook County Board of Commissioners, who has held several positions in the last two mayor's administrations. But whoever wins will become the city's first black woman mayor, and only the second black person and the second woman to be the head of that city. Now, therefore, the African American communities are seeing this as momentous, and you got to figure that Smollett plays into this. An opportunity to refocus attention from the south side over to the west side where all the problems are, where all the unemployment is and all the Great Depression stuff they say is, all the crime, that sort of thing. So I have my real doubts about that. We haven't ever had anything change here locally because we had a black in office from representing the district. It just doesn't happen. The Democrat Party doesn't want it to happen. The Democrat Party wants it to stay that way so they can blame your problems on the Republicans. They don't want it to, they don't want black people. Let me tell you something, friends. They don't want your lot to improve. They'll pay lip service to it. They'll pay lip service to it all day long. But you're not going to see it actually improve under them. They can't have it improve. If it improves, they're out of business. I mean, they don't need you. You don't need them. So, we'll see how it goes. I mean, the Cook County Democratic Party makes this goofy thing around here run by Chestnut to look like and by the way, the GRU, I guess you've seen this. We'll probably throw it up in a minute. I don't know where it is right now, Jay. If you get it, we'll throw it up there. The GRU is, Having a speaker series on ethics of all things. Yeah. Yeah, and it's going to feature the Chestnut family. And the speaker will be Gillum. But my point is, GRU is doing this, and GRU is using your utility money to pull this stuff off. So GRU is supporting not just a liberal agenda, but a black liberal agenda. Meanwhile, its rates are killing black Gainesville. They do nothing about any kind of relief for black Gainesville utility rates, and yet they turn around and they feature Gillum as a speaker and they shine a spotlight on the Chestnuts, I guess, to show something that they are in cool, or I don't know what you call it. I mean, tell me. Well, the national group here, so you understand this, is that what we have here in this community, like obviously the west side of Chicago is comparable to our east side of Gainesville. That's where all the black and poverty is, and all that business. And it's generally just allowed to languish. The Democrats say Rob Emanuel's done nothing for it. Here, the mayor of How Low Can You Go, Bowtie Poe, has done nothing for it. So, but it gets a lot of verbiage and political speak from the politicians when they run for office. Oh, they're going to change all this. It's all going to be different. We're going to bring this and that to East Gainesville. We're going to bring this to the west side of Chicago. No, you're not. No, you're not. And then on the other side of the coin, they're up there allowing this Tlaib woman to bash the Patton woman who's actually got her sleeves rolled up and is in the HUD trying to do something. I mean, this is what I tell you. I know a guy who's running for public office right now who has no experience in the public office. Okay? And, one of the things that it's kind of like you're going to be asked to swim. It's kind of like the way John Martin learned to swim. His brother held him over the deep end by the ankles and let him go. Okay? That's the way you learn to swim at Hawthorne. Okay. Well, you either got out of the water alive or you drowned it, right? So this is the way it is with politics. I know a guy who's running for the mayor of a city who's never held public office, who doesn't know a darn thing of what he's in for. He could win. I don't know. And if he's in, what's his learning curve going to be? And what's he going to encounter right away? He better be able to handle political liars. I mean, they are all over the place. And they'll say one thing, do another thing. They'll backstab you, all this kind of stuff. You got to have your head on very, very firmly if you're going to get in the political arena. And, Trump does. Man, what a training ground for president to come through the New York real estate world and bash it out with those people and get all those projects done. I mean, that is really where politics come into play. Getting things done through all the regulations, this, that, one thing, another, dealing with the banks, dealing with the public, all that kind of stuff. That's all training ground for politics. And they say, oh, he doesn't know anything about politics. He's never been a politician. That dude has been a politician all his life. Somebody who doesn't know anything about politics is Barack Obama. He's been nothing but a community organizer. He's never done a single thing. I don't even think he's ever done a house for Habitat. I mean, come on. Who are you kidding? House for Habitat for Humanity, yeah. So this is what's going on in Chicago. They're all up there making promises. They're all going to use, they don't want Smollett out there in the way because he's going to, he's going to confuse the issue. They wanted him out of the way before this mayor's race took place. They wanted it out of the way before the mayor's race took place. And, the Fox woman made it happen. I mean, that's the interpretation by the Hill. All right. And it also makes sense to me that that's what went down. And that Chicago is going to face the same challenges, if not worse, when one of these two black women gets in office. It's not going to make any difference. It's just going to increase the corruption. So Jay asked me to tie the local into national. The Democratic Power Organization is what we're talking about now. We have in this county the same thing that Chicago has. I mean, this city, the same thing as Chicago. And the county, the Democrat Party runs the whole thing with all of its graft and all of its connections and all of its rigging the system and controlling the press. It controls the paper here. As I said, you will not read in this paper, I promise you. And I'll be very surprised, and I'll eat my words if it happens. Anything about Corrine Brown trying to get her trial thrown out because of Kavanaugh's ruling in the case in Texas about the Buddha minister being in there with the criminal about to be executed. You would have to have an imagination par excellence to put that stuff together, and I don't think you'll ever read it. I want to swap over to education a little bit because people have been asking me to do this for a while, a little job on education. Now, let me just start out with an article here in the, once again, in the Wall Street Journal. You know, let me give you a little background on myself. You know, I was in education for, over 40 years, probably taught, 20, 30,000 students. A bunch of stuff. You can go out on wardscottfiles.com and look at my resume and get everything I've done. That's my website for the old radio shows. We had all the radio shows there. And, of course, wardscottfiles.tv is where we keep our podcast now. So I've got two sites, wardscottfiles.tv and wardscottfiles.com. Now, when I was president of the College Senate, which was for 4 years, and that time it was unprecedented for anybody to do that in successive years, I was in charge of the Senate. I mean, I set up the chairs of the committees, and one of the things that I was in charge of was the professional committee, and I had to find a chair for the professional committee. And the charge of the professional committee was to develop an evaluation device for what a good teacher was, what an average teacher was, what a poor teacher was. And the whole idea wouldn't be punitive. If we found a poor teacher, we'd try to rehabilitate the poor teacher and see if we couldn't, make the poor teacher a better teacher and the better teacher a great teacher, all that sort of thing. That's what ideologically was the purpose of the search then for the ideal evaluation instrument. And we called in experts from all over the world. And the problem is it's very difficult to know what excellent teaching is with one of those devices. Those fill-in-the-blank questions with multiple choices graded by a machine do not get it, all right? And really and truly, as we say out in Lake Cross, the only way to know what a great teacher is to take a look at his or her students 10 years, 15 years later and see how many of them are great. And that will tell you who the great teachers were. And Jay says I've got to keep track of him now because Jay's one of my students now. And all of you are some of my students. So really, what happens is that's how you finally ultimately know. And you'll know because great teachers are remembered and praised. Now, you take Steve Spurrier, for example. He's a great teacher. And you hear guys, particularly in the quarterback position, say that again and again and again. Man, I learned so much from that guy. He taught me so much about how to be a quarterback. That's his gig. That's what he's great at. That's what he enjoys doing. That's where his passion is. And look at all the great quarterbacks he's had and all the success he's had with the teams built around them. And so that's basically it. Now, if you filled out a questionnaire, a computer-graded questionnaire on whether Steve was better or worse than this coach, I don't think you get that as well as you'll get it out on the field. So my point is the results happen on the field of life, if you will. But be that as it may, there's always this job by the administration to corrupt that process, all right? And this caught my eye. Now at Villanova, and you know Villanova because it's a pretty good school, it's a Catholic school. Marty LaCory came from Villanova and held the country's mile record for a while, and he's still seen around town here. He's a really good guy, and he was one of my buddies in the old days, and I've actually run on the track with Marty and still maintain a great friendship with Marty. So Villanova has done the search that all people do in these institutions. They look for a better, improved evaluation document. Only here's what they've done with the evaluation document at Villanova, as they're doing at many colleges. And this is written by a professor of all things in political sciences. You would think he'd be going along with it. But they have added to the questionnaire. Now, don't stay seated. I know this is going to alarm you. Jay, I know this is going to alarm you. But now if you're a professor, the questionnaire is going to include questions about, guess what now? Say after me, class. Diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion. Okay? And the teaching evaluation forms that are being distributed at Villanova are going to ask questions each semester about the professor's demonstration of cultural awareness, Jay. Are you with me, Jay? You didn't pass out, did you? Cultural awareness of diversity and inclusion. And you're going to be able to answer on the questionnaire graded by a machine, Jay, whether or not the professor created, are you ready for this, sir? An environment, You ready? Free of bias based on individual differences or social identities. Which is what? Code for race and sex. Huh? Huh? Come on, Jay. That's where it is right now at Villanova and many other colleges. We're just using Villanova and its illustration. Now, I've been in these shoes here. I can tell you I have been involved in this search for the perfect evaluation instrument. We never had this in it, but we got it in there now. And does he demonstrate cultural awareness? Is there an environment free of individual bias based on individuals' differences in social identities? Now, in short, according to the writer, and I agree, the professors are being asked, students are being asked to rate their professors according to their perceived agreement with the progressive political opinion. Do you now see how these universities become bastions of liberal thinking? You develop an evaluation instrument which curries favor with that type of person, and you reward those students and teach them to look for that. Rather than looking, did you learn what 2 plus 2 is, and it can't be 5 unless you're in, theoretical mathematics, and then 2 plus 2 can be anything, rather than questions like that. I often thought if you're teaching rhetorical strategies, what you should do is give the students 4 or 5 sentences to correct and see if they can correct them. And if they can't correct them, they came from Mrs. Jones's class and they can correct them easily coming from mine. What does that tell you? Somebody taught them to do it. That's what you should be doing. So the students are being asked to rate their professors on their political opinion. Some people have these they direct me to rate my professor out on the web. That is the most imprecise hunk of junk that was ever brought up. It means nothing. So sensitivity to diversity of the students in the class. Now, that word sensitivity is a buzzword, all right? It is a buzzword. Are you with me? You need to know how to paraphrase lefty political jargon, all right? Sensitivity means, tolerant of diversity and inclusion. And if you're not tolerant of diversity and inclusion, you're insensitive. Now, it's very difficult to fire a tenured professor for being conservative, all right? Or I'd have been run out of that dadgum college a long time ago. And the doggone questionnaires didn't have any way of finding out if there were pluses or minuses to me being conservative. And by conservative, what it means to me, I'll tell you what it means to me. You came to class on time. Did you work on time? You learned how to not make excuses for yourself. You learned how to defend yourself and your country with a pencil. You know all those things you learned. That's what you signed up for, and that's what the measurements should be about. So to infect these measurements with these type of things is really, I'll let you make up your mind about it. But so you can't fire a professor for being conservative. But get this, Jay, you could fire a professor for creating, now let's follow the syllogism here. If this is so, then that's so, and if that's so, then this is so. You could fire a professor for creating a hostile workplace. Okay? Now, a hostile workplace can mean that you don't endorse the snowflake's feelings. Do you understand that? That you dared take the snowflakes out of their comfort zone. Huh? You dared take the snowflakes out of their comfort zone. So we've got everything we're talking about. A new term I learned today. One of the things that happened in the O.J. Simpson trial, there's a term for it, there's a lawyer term for it, was jury nullification. In other words, you nullify the impact of the jury, and it's really moot whether or not the jury says yes or no, because the jury's already going to go along with the defense attorney because he's outfoxed the prosecutor and, found out who was going to side with him to start with through subtle psychological evaluations, this, that, one, and another. Now, a new term we have in the Smollett case is prosecutorial nullification. We can nullify prosecutors too. And here in education, we might as well say professorial nullification. I think so. Nullification. Yeah. Just nullify sound thinking. Just nullify reasonable, know in reason. All the way, it does. It ties everything together, Jay. It goes all the way back to Corrine, right? I mean, the guy stands up in the middle of the trial and says, oh, the law just told me she's innocent. Stop the trial. Well, he didn't know in reason. He wanted to nullify all the reason with his connection with belief and faith, none of which he could prove. He can't prove the Lord said that to him. I am telling you. It is a weird world, and it's getting weirder. Now, something else that struck my mind here that I wanted to maybe close out here with you. I got so much more stuff that I haven't gotten to. As several people noticed this, Gateway Pundit has written about it. In Savannah's mayor's forum, all right? I suppose that the city here ought to do it. They kicked me out of the League of Liberal Women Voters kicked me out of the forum because I was writing. I wasn't legitimate, right? Although I had to behave according to all the rules to the rest of people, So they banned me. In Savannah, get this, they got a sign up, Jay. It says black press only. Huh? Black press only. A mayoral candidate forum in Savannah, Georgia, barred white folks from reporting on the event. Quote, no audio or video recording, read one sign, while another read no media, TV, radio, etc., black press only. The forum was organized by one Reverend Clarence Teddy Williams and was intended to serve as a vehicle to galvanizing the black vote to support one black candidate for mayor rather than split the vote between three potential, that's actually among us for more than two, Jay, between us for two, okay? Don't be as stupid as this writer. Rather than split the vote among three potential candidates. And oddly enough, this meeting took place at a Baptist church. Now, we've got also the image of the meeting place, do we not? The sign. Okay, good. You got the sign. There we go. That's on the church. It was coordinated by Reverend Clarence Teddy Williams. And there you go. I mean, that's in Savannah, Georgia, for crying out loud. I guess they don't get no stranger than that. I think that's pretty strange. Got an odds and end thing. You may recall, if you've been watching the show for a while, we once upon a time, Stephen Yunder Long, who is one of the many kids of Rodney Long, if I remember correctly, was caught going down the street, and there was some drugs in his pocket of his pants. And when he was caught, he said, "These aren't my pants." This is true. I didn't make that up. Going down the street, he's caught. He got drugs in his pants. So the cops pull him over, and he says, "Well, these aren't my pants." Okay. Well, he must have known Stephen Yunder Long, this guy does, in Austintown, Ohio, when Damon K. Clark Jr., he was 20. He was stopped in a traffic stop, and drugs were found in his socks. So when they found the drugs in his socks, what do you suppose he said? And there was also cocaine in the socks. And when they asked him about the drugs in his socks, he said, "Are you ready for this, Jay? These aren't my socks." Huh? There you are. There you are. I don't know. That's not too far off of Corrine Brown's attempt to tie into to the Kavanaugh ruling in in the trial in Texas. I mean, try anything you can. Well, there you are. What's our theme today for the students? Nullification of sound thinking. That's been our theme today, students. Nullification of sound thinking. If I ask you to write an essay on that, I expect you to be able to develop that thought and give examples of how we use that in trying to cheat on getting our way in an argument. Huh? Can you handle that? That's what I miss about teaching. I miss throwing that up there, Jay, as a writing assignment and letting the students go after it. And that's a lot of fun. So have a great day. I think it's got a rainy day today, and we've need it. We need it badly. So Warthog Command Center out.
Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
Do you want to put your business in front of 10,000 new customers? Visit wardscottfiles.tv today for more information on our advertising opportunities.